Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, where we talk with key spokespeople in the logistics industry about topical issues. Hosted by Peter McLeod, editor of Logistics Business magazine.
Hello and welcome again to Logistics Business Conversations. It's another special edition recorded in person at the Logistics Business podcast studio. Today's edition is brought to you by OPEX and entitled Let's Talk Automation, Sortation, Storage and Smarter Logistics. I'm joined today by Mike Morgan, Business Development Manager at OPEX. Hi, Mike, and welcome to Logistics Business Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to be chatting to you about this broad subject. Let's break it down into three buckets. We've got sortation, we've got storage, and we've got smarter logistics. So sortation, what are the customers coming to you for? What are their challenges?
So sortation is such a broad subject. A lot of the time, there's kind of two sides to the sortation. What I see mainly is you kind of got people that are starting their automation journey. So this is their way of starting to deploy technology. What does that look like? And sortation is quite a broad field. There's a lot of meat on the bone for sortation. So that's something they want to tackle first. The other is they've got a lot of automation. There's a lot of things going on and they really need to get a hold of their operation. So how do we condense that down? So in the market, what I see and where I see our products being a really good strength, the conversations I like to have is that kind of introduction, is to say, okay, we can solve with sortation a lot of problems upstream and downstream. So if you're coming to me and you said, hey, my pick is chaotic. I've got so many pickers. I've got shifts all over the place. I've got, SKUs all over the place. How can you help me with that? Generally, I'll guide them towards the sortation and say, well, if we look at the sortation and what we're funneling everything towards, so we're going to be building those orders in a more efficient way. What that unlocks for us is a more efficient pick, more efficient storage strategy, denser storage, less requirement for people on the pick. So we get the upstream benefits from that downstream implementation. And then what we also unlock then is, okay, well, that downstream of order consolidation, packing, staging, we get that as well. So the sortation part is generally a really good introduction into automation, but also what it allows us to do is unlock upstream and downstream benefits within a warehouse.
So is it fair to say that your customer doesn't really know what he wants in terms of the automation? They know they've got a problem that needs sorting. They just come to you to provide the way to sort that.
I mean, yes and no. I think, we know that those running the warehouses know their warehouses, their operations better than anyone. But sometimes when you're inside an operation, you get so fixated on what you think a solution is that you don't necessarily see what a solution could be. So when I go in, I look with a nice fresh pair of eyes, say, well, actually, if we were to deploy this thing instead of that thing, you'll get X, Y, and Z. Is that of interest to you? Is that the right level of conversation we want to have? When we're deploying ASRS, stuff like that, the storage, that tends to be a bit more of a heavier lift. Naturally, you're storing stuff, so you need a bigger machine to do that, right? With the sortation, it's a little bit of a lighter lift. It's a lighter implementation. It's a really good start. And oftentimes, if it isn't a start, it can fit into an already developed system quite well. So I tend to find that sortation isn't necessarily the leading subject of a conversation, but it's always at the heart of it.
It's sortation very much at the heart of your company. I noticed back at IMHX, you were flagging 50 years up, but you haven't been in the warehouse sortation industry for 50 years. However, the pedigree of the company extends over those 50 years very much into the postal sector. Can you tell us a little bit about how the company came to be and how it grew into the warehouse sector?
Yeah, of course. So I'll give you the story. I like the story. Our founder, so our company is family owned. And one of the things you get that is that you do get the kind of family values. It makes OPEX a very nice place to be. Representing that and transmitting that to customers, how we deliver things on site, how we do business, how we look after customers, it really does come through from that family value set. The founder, Stevens, was working in a mailroom for a record company that would basically, you'd mail in a check, say, I want to buy this record, and they would take the check, process it, and mail it out. And he saw the operation, knew he had to automate. The checks all over the place. We need to do better, faster, better, more. So again, this is a man who's already dialed into that kind of level of thing. So what he did is he actually found OPEX and bought some of their products, which were originally mail processing products or document mail automation, deployed them into his mailroom. They were very successful, and he actually was one of the pioneers of that. So the OPEX guys would actually come to him and do demos and show customers and showcase and use him as an example. Now, after a while, they said, do you want a job? Do you want to work for us? He said, yeah, why not? We'll do it. So, took his family over to the East Coast and started OPEX. And when he got there, he realized actually things in the company weren't quite what they was led to believe. So he made a decision, said, I'm going to buy the company. Buy this company, I'm going to make it my own. So we did, made OPEX and developed all the document mail automation systems. So that's where our pedigree is. That efficiency, that grounding in speed is kind of what our technology and our ethos is rooted in. Now, we've been in warehouse automation since 2010, which, is, you could say, is relatively new for warehouse terms, but there's a lot of companies popping up and disappearing quite quickly. We've got a real solid core foundation, technological basis, and a value set, which I think is important that we really take across to all our products and deliver to our customers. So that's kind of my Reader's Digest of OPEX.
It's a great story, Mike, and I just wonder whether we need to explain to our younger audience what the hell checks are, because I can't remember the last time I wrote.
It's like a mechanical Spotify, isn't it? So instead of downloading music, you would send off money and get a disc in return.
It seems like a different world altogether. And, that's really where we are with in the world of logistics as well, from what a warehouse looked like 50 years ago to what a warehouse looks like today.
Yeah.
Very, very sophisticated systems, cutting edge systems. And, as an automation supplier, you're very much on the front foot there. So customers who are looking for smarter storage solutions, where can you help them? And, what are their challenges? Is it cost per square meter of warehousing space? Is it just optimizing existing space?
It's all of the above. The pressures are enormous. Everything has to be faster, cleaner, cheaper, easier, safer, absolutely.
Less carbon.
Everything. The pressures are all over the place. Automation is a logical step for a lot of businesses. Storage, obviously, is pretty much the bread and butter of all logistics operations. So we see a lot of people saying, okay, how do we get as much stuff as possible into the least amount of space as possible and retrieve it as quickly as possible? That's generally they ask, and there are lots of ways to do that. We have two technologies in the ASRS side, which is we have the Infinity and we have our Perfect Pick. Again, really, really low footprint, which is kind of what we base our offering on. We have a larger tote, which is good for basically more stock eligibility. So when we have bigger items, things easier to stock. And the other thing about that is we can get a higher hit rate because we can store potentially more SKUs in a tote. So that's kind of what we lean into, is to say, okay, how do we optimize from storage and delivery perspective? The one thing that we do is speed. So again, going back to what we were saying before about, the document mail automation efficiency, is everything that we do is generally rooted in speed and efficiencies. So we want to bring as much to the operator as possible, as quickly as possible, because that means that you need less operators and you get more out of the system. And if you're getting stuff out quicker, then arguably you need to store less. Obviously, you need to feed it more. So that's where the speed element comes in. So you kind of use it as almost like a big buffer. So there's lots of different angles that we try and play, but the pressures that we see are only growing. We only ever see warehouses getting smaller. We only ever see operations getting more expensive. So they need to reduce costs. We only ever see, carbon emissions and mentioning of that, solar panels and stuff like that. How do we reduce footprint? All those kind of conversations really mixing into the pot, which is good news because they're all problems we can solve. Being in that situation with the pressures, because you've got to grow quickly and make things work, that's obviously where we have to work with our customers to grow with them in their operation. It's generally not a case of just going in and solving a problem in one go. It's a case of saying, okay, how do we solve, today's problem for the next sort of 12, 18 months, and then keep growing to where you need to be in the next 12, 18 months and further into the future. And that's really how we support those operations. Ultimately, everything's tailored to whatever people need.
So you're sitting at a mixing desk and you've got all these sliders. One of them says efficiency, another one says speed, another one says visibility, another one says carbon elimination. You have to turn all of them up to 11, which I'm sure is impossible to have them all turn up. So there's always a compromise. So if somebody wants greater visibility, can you help them there? Greater visibility of stock?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have really powerful software that tracks what we do. We call it RPM, Remote Performance Management, and that gives you obviously all your metrics in the machine. If you imagine F1 driving around the track, you see all the data that gets extracted from that machine. It's pretty much, all that. See, you want a dashboard of exactly what that operation is. The ability of any operation is exactly what you need first, but we need to really understand what operation is. We need to understand what's good and what's bad before we can go in and fix it. It's very easy to go in and say, hey, just throw this machine in. If you don't know what the problem you're going to solve, you might also create a problem. We need to understand a real holistic view of what's important. So like you say with the sliders, is storage really what you need, or can you get away with less storage and more speed? Does that help? So is speed what you need, or could you get away with less speed? What levers do we need to pull to make this work for you? And a lot of the time, when you're going from maybe a manual operation, or let's say a less complex, or even a very complex operation, A, and then we're trying to change it into our operation B, one doesn't always equal the other. Because you're doing that today doesn't mean that you're going to do that tomorrow with this machine, because that doesn't necessarily work. So we need to understand ultimately what the end game is. What's the assignment? What are we trying to achieve at the end of this, and aim for that, and not try and replicate what we're doing today, but just make it electric.
So again, a big challenge across all industries is labor attraction, labor retention. I guess an optimized warehouse will help solve some of those issues for your customers.
Labor is difficult. Warehouses aren't glamorous. Then they're hard work. They are the backbone of any country. We need logistics operations, and we've proven that, in years gone by, how important it is to have a robust infrastructure. So having people in post is absolutely necessary. If we can't do that, then we need another means of being able. Automation can alleviate that burden. There are such things as lights off logistics operations. That isn't necessarily what every company can achieve, especially on day one. So we need to go for the wins. How do we solve the big problems right now? How do we solve that little problem tomorrow? How do certain levels? The other thing that we can do with automation is not only with the labor, attraction and retention, it's on customer side as well, because the market is competitive. And not only is automation, machinery, technology attractive, it also shows an element of robustness in the market. You can manage fluctuations, you can upscale, downscale with automation. There are lots of levers you can pull that aren't necessarily available to you in manual. You can adapt a little bit quicker with automation. But what that means for the customer is they're looking at someone and saying, okay, I trust this company to do my, let's say it's a 3PL, for instance. I trust this company to do my bidding over someone who's maybe wholly relying on manual, because it has that optics of establishment and reliability. So not only is it from the inside, but from the outside, automation is becoming a lot. I'm having a lot of conversations about seeing people saying we need to keep up in the market. We understand that maybe our manual element isn't going to disappear, but we need to show that we're moving forward with the technology and that we can be trusted. And that's what automation can provide, and technology deployment can provide, is that element of trust in the market. People believing, say, if you're investing into your operation, you believe in that, it helps build that trust illusion. I don't want to call it an illusion, but it's that, that element of reliability in any operation.
It's interesting, Mike, if we'd been having this conversation 10 years ago, well, not only would I be 10 years younger, which is a good thing, and probably a couple of stone lighter, which is also another very good thing, but we'd be saying you may have to sacrifice flexibility. If you want to go up the automation route, it's usually because your business, as repeated, there's an element of repeatability to it.
Right.
What you've just told me today is you can automate and be flexible as well. A very positive development in warehouse automation.
Absolutely. So there are technologies that are inherently more modular in deployment. The entry level to automation has come down a hell of a lot. It used to be you'd have to be a conglom to be able to afford automation. You'd be talking 8-9 figures for deployments. Now you're talking 6. That's a huge reduction, and the ROI that unlocks, because not only now is the technology cheaper, but it's more capable, like you said before, more adaptable. So we can scale up and down. If we say, okay, we need a machine that's X big today. Oh, we're going to take on more clients. We need it now X plus Y. That is possible. We don't have to build a room out of steel, and lock everything in place and then say, oh, you need more? Oh, you're going to need to buy a new warehouse now. That's not the case at all. So we're coming in at a lower level, and you've got that ability to grow and adapt with customers and clients, which, like you said, 10 years ago wasn't really.
And when we talk about flexibility, obviously, a big area of that is the way that a business's product range, product volumes will shift as contracts change. But also, does that take into account seasonal peaks and troughs?
Yeah, absolutely. So when designing a system, you need to understand, what are we designing it for? Peaks, generally, you don't want to design for those because you're going to overspec a machine for a couple of weeks of the year. I mean, you could, but you're paying for, out of 52 weeks of the year, you know, maybe you need 3 times the size of a machine that you need for the other 50. So the question then becomes, how do we get 3 times as much out of this system for peak? What's the best way? Is it deploying more people? Sometimes it's an easy one. Is it running a triple shift? Should it turn into a 24-hour operation instead of an 8-hour operation? Those are the kind of things you want to understand when you're talking with a customer. What's important to you? Or if you want to design for peak, okay, that's great. But then how do you justify it for the rest of the year? And see whether there are options there that make sense when you're deploying the technology. So that flexibility can be limited, because you not only do you want to flex with an operation, but you also want to make sure that it's robust enough to withstand the meat of the operation and the meaningful part of the operation. If you're running 360 days at 10 units an hour, whatever that means, but for 5 days it's 50, does it make sense to service and maintain a machine that's 5 times as capable? I don't know. It's not, that is my question to answer. That's obviously up to what the operation is. Those are the kind of conversations you find yourself in, which are a lot more meaningful than saying, let's just get a piece of kit in and it'll do stuff. It's a case of, what are you actually trying to do? And what is the tool in the toolbox we need to deploy? And then what setting do we need to put that tool at that's going to really optimize your operation?
So we return to the title of this episode. We're talking sortation, storage, and smarter logistics. So I guess we've covered quite a lot of what smarter logistics really means. But how would you sort of define that in today's age of high automation?
Smart logistics, for me, is really understanding the assignment. Really understanding what is it we're trying to achieve. What's the end game? We can deploy, again, going back to the conversation before, we can deploy technology very easily, in months, in cases, take up very little space, very light lift. Integration is very, very easy. And sometimes that can look like it's the right answer, but sometimes it isn't. So it's really understanding, what is the operation and what's going to benefit this operation? We do that in the best way possible. That, to me, is what smart logistics is. There is no end of technology out there. There's tons of it. And there's lots of really, really good stuff and lots of really, really good companies that are doing great work and really doing the business. But it doesn't mean that you have to go out and do it. Sometimes just understanding a little bit better about what you're doing is enough, because you find that actually you might have your eye on this big, 10 million pound machine, but actually all you need is, I only need maybe this is a 100-gram machine over here. That's going to really solve my problem. So for me, it's about always solving the customer's problem. What is the problem? How do we identify it? And then how do we solve that problem? And how do we get the right tool in the toolbox to solve that problem? And that for me, that's what smart logistics is.
So, Mike, as we're coming towards the end of this episode of Logistics Business Conversations, I want to create I have to confess, somewhat unreal scenario, but I'm a customer. I come charging up to OPEX HQ, running up to your big leather and walnut desk and say, help, my operations are not running as smoothly as I can. Can you tell that customer why they should come to you rather than knocking on the competitor's door?
At that point, I don't know if they should come to us. I would encourage anyone to go and explore all the technology, all the tools in the toolbox. There are ideas that might get unlocked from talking to one person, talking to another. I was literally just having this conversation earlier with one of my colleagues. Is the thing that excites me most about the technology in the market now is, even though there's a lot of competition, there's also a lot of technology that can work together and get exponential gains. So there's a lot of tangential technology that can sit side by side. One thing can do maybe 10%, another thing can do 10%. 1 + 1 = 10 when you put these things together. So you come charging up, I would say, let's take a look. Let's go see the facility. Let's look at the data. You tell me what your problems are, and we'll go through the process. But I would absolutely encourage you to go and do that with 3 other people, because who knows what you might unearth. And, there's all the great integrators out there that are really good at bringing it all together. So there's definitely people out there to solve the problems.
Well, Mike, I have to say, in the world of smart logistics, that was a super smart answer. And I've had a really smart conversation with you today. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a great pleasure talking with you today.
Pleasure being here. Thank you.
So thanks for joining us in our studio here. And also thanks to OPEX for supporting this edition of Logistics Business Conversations. And thanks to you, the listener, for joining us today. Wherever you get your podcasts from, please subscribe to Logistics Business Conversations to make sure the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Mike Morgan.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter McLeod. Goodbye.